How to Stop Worrying and Start Living by Dale Carnegie. Picture this. You're trapped 276 feet underwater, and all hell is breaking loose above you. That's exactly where Robert Moore found himself in March 1945. He was one of 88 men squeezed into a submarine off the coast of Indochina, hunting a Japanese convoy. Everything was going according to plan until a spotter plane caught sight of them. Suddenly, a Japanese mine layer wheeled around and charged straight toward their position. The command crackled through the sub, rig for depth charge. The fans went silent. The cooling system shut down. The entire vessel held its breath, suspended in the dark water like a steel coffin. Then the nightmare began. For 15 solid hours, depth charges hammered them relentlessly. Not just a handful, scores of them, close enough that the submarine groaned and shuddered with each explosion. Close enough to shove them down to the ocean floor, into crushing, suffocating darkness. Inside that sweltering metal tube, where the air was thick and the temperature hit 100 degrees, Robert Moore couldn't stop shaking. The fear ran so deep that his teeth chattered uncontrollably. Cold sweat drenched his body. He threw on a sweater, then a fur-lined jacket, but nothing could warm him. One thought looped endlessly through his mind. This is death. This is death. Between explosions, in those terrible moments of silence, his entire life replayed before his eyes. He thought about his old bank clerk job, the endless hours, the lousy pay. He remembered obsessing over not being able to afford a new car or nice clothes for his wife. He'd hated his boss with a passion. He'd even spent time worrying about a tiny scar on his forehead from a car accident. Then something clicked. How absolutely ridiculous those worries seemed now. How laughably small when death was literally just a few feet of steel away. Right there, in that moment of clarity, he made himself a promise. If he ever saw the sun and stars again, he would never, ever waste another moment worrying. He survived. And those 15 terrifying hours taught him more about actually living than 4 years of university ever had. What if you could learn that same secret without nearly dying to get it? What if you could silence that constant background hum of anxiety that's been robbing you of peace, energy, and joy? Today, we're diving into a book that's been a lifeline for millions of people, searching for exactly that. It's called How to Stop Worrying and Start Living by the legendary Dale Carnegie. Since it first hit the shelves, it sold over 6 million copies, becoming an absolute classic for anyone who's ever felt crushed by the weight of what if. Carnegie himself knew worry intimately. Before he became world famous, he was a deeply unhappy young guy in New York, selling motor trucks, living in a cockroach-infested room, suffering from headaches fueled by disappointment and bitterness. He was drowning in a life that felt like a waking nightmare. This book wasn't written from some ivory tower. It was forged in the fire of his own suffering and tested in what he called his laboratory for conquering worry, his adult education classes, where thousands of real people shared their battles with anxiety. By the time we're done today, you'll have a toolbox full of simple, powerful, time-tested strategies to deal with the worries holding you back. You'll discover the magic formula for solving any problem, the secret to breaking the worry habit before it breaks you, and the mental shifts that can transform your daily life from anxious to peaceful, from paralyzed to purposeful. This isn't just about feeling better. It's about reclaiming the life that worry has been stealing from you, one day at a time. Let's jump in. When you look at Dale Carnegie's life, you find a man who understood one of the deepest truths about being human. Worry is a thief. And it's not picky about what it steals. Your happiness, your health, your energy, your ability to actually live in the present moment. He saw it eating away at himself, and he saw it destroying the thousands of students who came to his classes. Successful executives, housewives, accountants, salesmen, all carrying around this heavy, invisible burden. The wild part? This burden usually wasn't coming from the big, catastrophic events of life. More often, it was the constant drip, drip, drip of small anxieties, wearing people down. He watched businessmen who never learned to fight worry die young. It was a silent killer. In his search for answers, Carnegie didn't try to invent some complicated new philosophy. Instead, he did what all great teachers do. He looked for the simple, fundamental truths that have worked for centuries. And the first, perhaps most powerful truth he uncovered can be summed up in a brilliant phrase from a famous physician named Sir William Osler. Osler was a rock star in the medical world. He organized the world-famous Johns Hopkins School of Medicine and got knighted by the King of England. When people asked him the secret to his success, he said it wasn't his brains. He claimed those were of the most mediocre character. His secret? Living in day-tight compartments. Think about a massive ocean liner for a second. The captain can press a button, and huge iron doors slide shut, sealing off different sections into watertight compartments. If the ship hits an iceberg and one compartment floods, the others stay safe, and the ship keeps floating. Osler urged us to do the same thing with our lives. Press a mental button and shut the iron doors on the past, the dead yesterdays. Let the past bury its dead. Don't waste a single moment trying to change what's already happened. Then press another button and shut off the future, the unborn tomorrows. Don't get lost spiraling into anxiety about what might happen next week, next year, or 10 years from now. The goal? Be safe for today. Your main job, he said, isn't to peer anxiously at what lies dimly in the distance. It's to do what lies clearly at hand, right now. This doesn't mean you don't plan for tomorrow. Of course you do. But the best way to prepare for tomorrow is to pour all your energy and enthusiasm into doing today's work superbly well, today. That's the only way you can possibly build a future worth having. This idea is revolutionary because it brings you back to the only time you can ever actually live, right now. From this moment until you fall asleep tonight. Anyone can carry their burden, however crushing, until nightfall. Anyone can do their work, however brutal, for one day. Think of an hourglass. There are thousands of grains of sand sitting in the top, but they all pass slowly and evenly through that narrow neck in the middle. Nothing you do will force more than one grain through at a time without shattering the glass. You and I are like that hourglass. When we wake up, there are hundreds of tasks screaming for attention, but if we don't take them one at a time, slowly and evenly, we'll break our own physical or mental structure. One grain of sand at a time, one task at a time. This simple philosophy saved a soldier named Ted Bengermino during World War II. He'd worried himself into severe combat fatigue, lost 34 pounds, and would sob like a child whenever he was alone. An army doctor gave him that hourglass analogy, and it completely turned his life around. It saved him physically and mentally during the war and helped him build a successful business when he came home. Living in, quote, day-tight compartments is the foundation. It's rule number 1. Shut those iron doors on the past and future. But what happens when a crisis slams into you today? When a problem is so massive and immediate that it threatens to swallow you whole right now? For that, Carnegie shares a magic formula he learned from a brilliant engineer named Willis Carrier, the guy who basically launched the air conditioning industry. Early in his career, carrier was sent to install a brand new gas cleaning device in this massive plant. The device was experimental, and it completely flopped. It just didn't work. He was stunned. It felt like being smacked in the head with a brick. The potential failure meant a $20,000 loss for his company, huge money back then, and could have cost him his job. The worry was so intense, he couldn't sleep. But here's the thing, worry wasn't solving anything, so he figured out a way to handle the problem. It's a simple 3-step technique anyone can use. Step 1. He analyzed the situation fearlessly and asked himself, what's the absolute worst that could possibly happen? In this case, he'd lose his job, and his company would lose their $20,000 investment. Nobody was going to shoot him or throw him in jail. That was the absolute worst-case scenario. Step 2. He reconciled himself to accepting the worst, if necessary. He told himself, okay, this failure will be a blow to my record. I might lose my job, but if I do, I can find another one. And my employers? They knew this was an experiment. They can afford the loss and chalk it up to research. By facing the worst and mentally accepting it, something remarkable happened. He immediately relaxed. A wave of peace washed over him that he hadn't felt in days. Step 3. From that point on, he calmly devoted his time and energy to trying to improve upon the worst, which he'd already accepted. With his mind clear and free from panic, he started running tests. He figured out that if they spent another $5,000 on additional equipment, they could solve the problem. They did exactly that. And instead of losing $20,000, the company made a profit of $15,000. This formula works because it yanks you out of those gray clouds of vague, terrifying fears and plants your feet firmly on solid ground. You know where you stand. You've faced the absolute worst, and you've accepted it. Now you have nothing left to lose, which means you have everything to gain. With your mind calm and your energy released, you're finally in a position to actually solve the problem. This isn't just some business trick. It can literally save your life. Carnegie tells this incredible story about Earl Haney, a guy from Nebraska who was diagnosed with incurable duodenal ulcers. 3 doctors told him to get his affairs in order, basically a death sentence. Facing death head-on, Haney made a decision. He'd always wanted to travel around the world. He thought, if I'm going to do it, it has to be now. His doctors were horrified. If you take this trip, they warned, you'll be buried at sea. No, I won't, he shot back. I've promised my relatives I'll be buried in the family plot in Broken Bow, Nebraska. So he bought himself a casket and took it with him on the ship. He'd faced the worst, dying, and accepted it. Now he set about improving upon it by enjoying whatever time he had left. On that trip, he ate strange foods, drank highballs, smoked cigars, and had more fun than he'd had in years. The constant sense of adventure and seeing real poverty in the Orient made his own troubles seem trivial. He stopped all his senseless worrying. When he got back to America, he'd gained 90 pounds and completely forgotten he'd ever had an ulcer. He sold the casket back to the undertaker and went back to business. He wasn't sick a single day after that. He'd unconsciously used the Willis Carrier formula. Accept the worst, then improve upon it. So for any big, immediate worry, remember the magic formula. Ask what's the worst that can happen. Prepare to accept it. Then calmly proceed to improve on the worst. But what about all those smaller, everyday worries buzzing around your head like mosquitoes? The ones that aren't quite a crisis but still drain your energy and peace of mind? For those, Carnegie gives us another powerful technique, a method for analyzing and solving worry problems. It comes from a guy named Galen Litchfield, an American business manager in Shanghai in 1942 when the Japanese army invaded. Litchfield was ordered to help a Japanese admiral liquidate his company's assets. He had to cooperate or face certain death. But he made a bold move. He left one block of securities worth $750,000 off the list he gave the admiral. These securities belonged to another branch and had nothing to do with the Shanghai assets. But he knew if the Japanese discovered this, he'd be in serious trouble. They discovered it. He wasn't in the office at the time, but his head accountant told him the admiral flew into an absolute rage, calling him a thief and a traitor. Litchfield knew exactly what this meant. He'd be thrown into the bridge house, the infamous torture chamber of the Japanese secret police. Friends of his had died in there. Others had taken their own lives rather than be taken. He heard the news on a Sunday afternoon. He should have been absolutely terrified. And he would have been, except he had a definite technique for solving his problems. For years, whenever he was worried, he'd go to his typewriter and answer two questions. Question 1. What am I worrying about? He typed, I'm afraid I'll be thrown into the bridge house tomorrow morning. Question 2. What can I do about it? He spent hours thinking through every possible course of action and the probable consequence of each. He wrote them all down. 1. Try to explain to the admiral. But the admiral didn't speak English. Using an interpreter might just make him angrier. That could mean death. 2. Try to escape. Impossible. He was watched constantly. If caught, he'd be shot. 3. Stay in his room and not go to the office. This would make the admiral suspicious. He'd probably send soldiers to drag him to the bridge house without a chance to explain. 4. Go to the office as usual on Monday morning and act like nothing was wrong. There was a chance the admiral would be busy and forget about it. Or maybe he'd have cooled off. Even if the admiral did confront him, he'd at least have a chance to try to explain. As soon as he analyzed everything and came to a clear decision, go with option 4, he felt immensely relieved. The failure to arrive at a fixed purpose, the inability to stop going around in circles, is what drives people mad. He found that 50% of his worries vanished the moment he arrived at a clear, definite decision. The next morning he went to the office. The Japanese admiral glared at him but said nothing. 6 weeks later, the admiral went back to Tokyo, and Litchfield's worries were over. He had likely saved his life by calmly thinking through the problem and making a decision. So when a worry problem is nagging at you, grab a piece of paper and write down the answers to these 4 questions. What am I worrying about? What can I do about it? List all possible actions. What am I going to do? Make a decision. When am I going to start doing it? Act immediately. These techniques, living in day-tight compartments, facing the worst, analyzing your problems, are powerful tools for dealing with worry when it shows up. But Carnegie realized that to truly live a worry-free life, you have to do more than just fight battles. You have to change the entire battlefield. You have to break the habit of worry before it breaks you. And the first, most effective way to do this is almost embarrassingly simple. Keep busy. There's this guy named Marion Douglas who was a student in one of Carnegie's classes. Tragedy hit him hard, not once but twice. He lost his 5-year-old daughter, whom he absolutely adored. 10 months later, a new baby girl was born, and she died in 5 days. The double loss was almost unbearable. He couldn't sleep, couldn't eat, couldn't rest. His nerves were completely shattered. Then one afternoon, his 4-year-old son came to him and said, "Daddy, will you build a boat for me?" He was in absolutely no mood to do anything, but his son kept asking. So he gave in. Building that little toy boat took about 3 hours. When it was finished, he realized something astonishing. Those 3 hours were the first hours of mental peace he'd had in months. It was a profound discovery. It's really difficult to worry while you're busy doing something that requires planning and thought. He realized he needed to stay busy. The next night, he went through his entire house and made a list of all the little jobs that needed doing. Bookcases, storm windows, leaky taps. The list had 242 items. Over the following years, he completed most of them. He got involved in civic activities, attended classes, filled his life with purpose. He simply had no time for worry. Winston Churchill said the same thing when he was working 18 hours a day during the war. When someone asked if he worried, he replied, "I'm too busy. I have no time for worry." This works because of a fundamental law of the human mind. It's utterly impossible for any mind, no matter how brilliant, to think of more than one thing at any given moment. You cannot be enthusiastic about doing something exciting and feel dragged down by worry at the very same instant. One emotion drives out the other. This is why occupational therapy is one of the oldest and best medicines for frayed nerves. When we aren't busy, our minds become a vacuum. And nature, as we know, hates a vacuum. What rushes in to fill that empty space? Usually emotions. And the raw, primal emotions of worry, fear, and hate are so violent that they tend to drive out all peaceful, happy thoughts. The remedy? Get completely occupied doing something constructive. Crowd worry out of your mind by keeping busy. But sometimes the worries plaguing us aren't big, looming threats. They're tiny, persistent annoyances, the little things. The beetles that can bring you down. We often face the major disasters of life bravely, only to let trifles destroy our peace. Carnegie tells this wonderful story from the great naturalist Dr. Harry Emerson Fosdick. On the slope of a mountain in Colorado lies the ruin of this gigantic tree. Naturalists say it stood for 400 years. During its long life, it was struck by lightning 14 times. Countless avalanches and storms thundered past it. It survived them all. But in the end, an army of tiny beetles attacked the tree and brought it down. The insects ate their way through the bark and gradually destroyed its inner strength. A forest giant that age hadn't withered, nor lightning blasted, nor storm subdued, fell at last before beetles so small a man could crush one between his thumb and forefinger. Aren't we all like that tree sometimes? Don't we survive the lightning strikes and avalanches of life, only to let our hearts be eaten out by the little beetles of worry? The sarcastic remark, the small slight, the minor inconvenience? Life is too short to be little. We're here on this earth for only a few decades, and we lose so many irreplaceable hours brooding over grievances that, in a year's time, will be forgotten by us and everyone else. Let's devote our lives to worthwhile actions and feelings, to great thoughts and real affections. Don't let the beetles get you down. Another common worry habit is dwelling on the past. We all make mistakes. We've all done foolish things. But there's only one way the past can be constructive: calmly analyzing our past mistakes, profiting from them, and then forgetting them. You can't saw sawdust. It's already been sawed. When you start worrying about things that are over and done with, you're merely trying to saw sawdust. Don't cry over spilled milk. Of course we wish we'd done things differently. So what? Who hasn't? Even Napoleon lost 1/3 of all the important battles he fought. All the king's horses and all the king's men can't put the past together again. So let the past bury its dead. Don't try to saw sawdust. Finally, one of the most sneaky worry habits is fretting about things that will probably never happen. Dale Carnegie, as a boy on a Missouri farm, was full of such worries. He worried he'd be killed by lightning. He worried he'd be buried alive. As the years went by, he discovered that 99% of the things he worried about never happened. The most famous insurance company on earth, Lloyd's of London, has made millions betting people that the disasters they're worrying about will never occur. They don't call it betting. They call it insurance. But it's really betting, based on the law of averages. The next time you're worrying about what might happen, examine the record. Ask yourself, what are the chances, according to the law of averages, that this thing I'm worrying about will actually occur? You'll often find the odds are overwhelmingly in your favor. Breaking the worry habit is crucial. But to build a truly peaceful and happy life, Carnegie says we must go deeper. We must cultivate a mental attitude that acts as a fortress against worry. And the cornerstone of that fortress is this single, profound idea, summed up in 8 words by the great Roman emperor and philosopher Marcus Aurelius: our life is what our thoughts make it. If we think happy thoughts, we'll be happy. If we think miserable thoughts, we'll be miserable. If we think thoughts of failure, we'll fail. Our mental attitude is the one factor that determines our fate. A person is what they think about all day long. How could they be anything else? This doesn't mean adopting some foolish head-in-the-sand attitude and ignoring our problems. Life's not that simple. Carnegie makes a vital distinction between concern and worry. Concern means realizing what the problems are and calmly taking steps to meet them. Worry means going around in maddening, futile circles. You can be concerned about a serious problem and still walk with your chin up and a spring in your step. The power of our thoughts is almost unbelievable. A British psychiatrist named J.A. Hadfield tested the strength of 3 men using a dynamometer. Under normal conditions, their average grip was 101 pounds. When he hypnotized them and told them they were very weak, their grip dropped to only 29 pounds. But when he then told them under hypnosis that they were very strong, their grip soared to an average of 142 pounds. When their minds were filled with positive thoughts of strength, they increased their physical power by nearly 500%. So how do we harness this power? How do we change our thoughts when we feel ourselves sinking into a negative state? The great psychologist William James gave us the secret. He said, "Action seems to follow feeling, but really action and feeling go together, and by regulating the action, which is under the more direct control of the will, we can indirectly regulate the feeling, which is not." In other words, you can't just decide to feel happy, but you can decide to act happy, and when you change your action, you'll automatically change your feeling. The fastest path to cheerfulness, if you've lost it, is to sit up cheerfully, and to act and speak as if cheerfulness were already there. Try it yourself right now. Put a big, broad smile on your face, throw your shoulders back, take a deep breath, sing a song or whistle. You'll quickly discover that it's physically impossible to remain blue or depressed while you're acting out the symptoms of being radiantly happy. This simple trick can work miracles. Think and act cheerfully, and you'll feel cheerful. Once we begin to control our thoughts, we can build other pillars of a strong mental attitude. One of the most important is learning to deal with the ingratitude of others. If we go around expecting gratitude for the good things we do, we're heading straight for a lot of heartache. It's natural for people to forget to be grateful. Christ healed 10 lepers in one afternoon, and only 1 stopped to thank him. Why should we expect more? The secret to happiness is to stop thinking about gratitude or ingratitude, and to give for the inner joy of giving. Carnegie's own parents were poor, but they always sent money to an orphan's home. They never expected thanks, but they were richly repaid with the joy of helping. Another pillar is to stop trying to be someone else. You are something new in this world. Never before, since the beginning of time, has there ever been anybody exactly like you. And never again, through all the ages to come, will there ever be anyone exactly like you. So be glad of it. Make the most of what nature gave you. As Emerson said, envy is ignorance, imitation is suicide. Don't be a second-rate version of someone else. Be a first-rate version of yourself. Charlie Chaplin, Will Rogers, Gene Autry, they all failed until they stopped imitating others and started being themselves. Find yourself and be yourself. And what happens when life hands you a setback? When things go wrong, as they inevitably will? The wise person follows this advice. When you have a lemon, make lemonade. The great psychologist Alfred Adler said one of the most wonderful characteristics of human beings is their power to turn a minus into a plus. Carnegie tells the story of Thelma Thompson, who was miserable living in a tiny shack near the Mojave Desert while her husband was in the army. The heat was unbearable, the wind blew sand into everything, and she was utterly lonely. She wrote to her father saying she was coming home. He wrote back just 2 lines. 2 men looked out from prison bars. One saw the mud, the other saw stars. She read those lines over and over, ashamed of herself. She decided she would look for the stars. She made friends with the natives. She studied the fascinating desert plants and animals. She watched the sunsets. The desert hadn't changed, but her attitude had, and by changing her attitude, she transformed a wretched experience into the most exciting adventure of her life. She even wrote a novel about it. She'd turned her lemon into lemonade. And perhaps the most powerful and counterintuitive secret to a worry-free life is this: forget yourself by becoming interested in others. The great psychiatrist Alfred Adler used to tell his patients suffering from depression, "You can be cured in 14 days if you follow this prescription. Try to think every day how you can please someone." Why does this work? Because trying to please others forces us to stop thinking about ourselves, the very thing that produces worry, fear, and depression. A good deed, said the Prophet Muhammad, is one that brings a smile of joy to the face of another. And a bit of fragrance always clings to the hand that gives you roses. When we fill our minds with thoughts of peace and courage, when we refuse to get even with our enemies, when we expect ingratitude and give for the joy of giving, when we count our blessings instead of our troubles, when we find ourselves and be ourselves, when we turn our lemons into lemonade, and when we forget ourselves in service to others, we're building a mental house that's strong and beautiful, a fortress that worry cannot penetrate. But Carnegie recognized there's one final, ultimate cure for worry, a source of peace and strength that millions have turned to throughout history, and that's a deep, abiding religious faith. He tells the story of how his own father, crushed by debt and failure on their Missouri farm, stood on a bridge debating whether to jump in and end it all. What stopped him? Carnegie's mother's deep, abiding, joyous belief that if they loved God and kept His commandments, everything would work out all right. William James, the father of modern psychology, said, "Of course, the sovereign cure for worry is religious faith, and today's psychiatrists teach the same thing." Dr. Carl Jung, one of the most distinguished psychiatrists who ever lived, wrote that among all his patients in the second half of life, there hadn't been one whose problem, in the last resort, wasn't finding a religious outlook on life. And none of them, he said, was really healed, who didn't regain it. Prayer is a practical tool. It fulfills 3 basic psychological needs. First, it helps us put into words exactly what's troubling us. Second, it gives us a sense of sharing our burdens, of not being alone. And third, it puts into force an active principle of doing. It's a first step toward action. Whether you call it God, or Allah, or Spirit, or the universe, connecting with a power greater than ourselves can give us a sense of peace and security that nothing else can. It allows us to say, as so many have in times of trouble, "Thy will be done," and to feel the release that comes from letting go. When the storms of life hit, when you've done all you can, when your own strength isn't enough, maybe the final step is to turn it over to a higher power and find the peace that passes all understanding. Ultimately, Dale Carnegie's message is one of profound hope and empowerment. Worry isn't some unconquerable monster, it's a destructive mental habit, and like any habit, it can be broken. By living in day-tight compartments, by facing our fears, by keeping busy, and by cultivating a mental attitude of peace and courage, we can, as the title promises, stop worrying and start living. As we wrap up our journey through how to stop worrying and start living, it's striking to think about how much the world has changed since Dale Carnegie first wrote these words. We live in an age of constant connectivity, social media feeds filled with curated perfection, and a 24-hour news cycle that seems designed to keep us in a state of perpetual low-grade anxiety. And yet these principles feel more relevant and necessary than ever. In a world pulling our attention toward 1,000 different tomorrows and reminding us of every mistake from yesterday, the simple, radical act of living in a day-tight compartment is a powerful form of rebellion. It's a declaration that your peace of mind matters more than the endless stream of digital noise. What makes Carnegie's wisdom so enduring is its profound simplicity and focus on action. This isn't a book of dense psychological theory. It's a practical manual for living, written by someone who learned these lessons not in a classroom but in the trenches of his own life and the lives of thousands of ordinary people. He understood that knowledge isn't power until it's applied. The most powerful lesson for me is the idea that we have a choice. We can't always control what happens to us. Life will hand us lemons. The depth charges will fall, the beetles will come for the tree. But we can always choose how we respond. We can choose to be broken by our circumstances, or we can choose to find the stars. We can choose to indulge in self-pity, or we can choose to turn our pain into purpose by helping someone else. That choice isn't always easy. It requires courage, and it requires practice. But this book is a reminder that we're stronger than we think. We have deep wells of strength within us that we often fail to use. Carnegie's work isn't just about stopping worry. It's about unlocking that hidden strength. So how can you start applying these ideas today, right now? Let me offer 3 simple challenges. First, tonight before you go to bed, try this. Grab a piece of paper and write down the 3 biggest things worrying you. For each one, apply Willis Carrier's magic formula. Ask yourself, what's the absolute worst that could happen? Then, mentally accept it. Finally, think of one small, concrete step you could take tomorrow to begin improving on that worst-case scenario. This simple act of putting your worries on paper and making a plan can lift a tremendous weight. Second, tomorrow, try this. Practice living in a day-tight compartment. When you wake up, make a conscious decision that your only job for the day is to live that single day to the best of your ability, right up until bedtime. When your mind starts drifting to next week's deadline, or a problem from last week, gently bring it back to the present moment. Focus on the one task, the one grain of sand that's right in front of you. And third, sometime this week, try this. Do one small, unexpected act of kindness for someone else, without any thought of getting something in return. Compliment the person who serves you coffee. Ask the delivery driver how their day's going, and really listen to the answer. Notice how that simple act of focusing outward, even for a moment, can quiet the anxious voice inside your own head. These aren't just tips and tricks. They're the building blocks of a new way of life. A life where you're in control, not your worries. A life where you're an active participant, not a passive victim of circumstance. We've explored the highlights of how to stop worrying and start living today, but I'll be honest, a summary can only ever be a map. The real treasure is found on the journey itself. The true magic happens when you read the book for yourself. In those quiet moments when a particular story or a simple phrase connects with you in a way you didn't expect. This podcast is designed to help you decide if this book is worth your time and attention. If anything we've discussed today has resonated with you, if you felt a flicker of hope or a sense of recognition, then I encourage you to grab a copy. Reading it isn't just about learning information. It's an experience that can genuinely change the way you see your world and your place within it. The link to the book is in the description below. And if you found this summary valuable, and you want to continue exploring the ideas that have shaped the most successful and wisest minds in history, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. That way you won't miss our next journey into another life-changing book. Let's keep learning and growing together.